Welcome to the Advantage Podcast, a monthly unscripted conversation with host David Ashcraft and top leaders impacting our world. Created by pastors for pastors to strengthen our leadership and expand our knowledge and influence.
Hey, well, welcome, guys. It's my honor, our honor and privilege to have Ned Pelger with us today. Ned, good to have you here. Thank you for jumping on the Advantage Podcast.
Thank you.
So let me tell you a little bit about Ned and just my relationship with Ned. I first met Ned, I want to say Ned probably 25 years ago. So it's right around 2000, wasn't it?
Yeah,
And
it was.
we were building a new auditorium back then at LCBC, and we were looking for an architect and a builder. And somehow we came across Ned, and it's been a great relationship. And I think you recently told me it's been 40 some building projects you've done for LCBC now.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is amazing. So tell us your history a little bit about just yourself so people know who you are and your involvement in the construction world.
Okay. Well, I was a pretty good wrestler in high school and ended up getting a new coach who said, "Hey, you could go to Princeton." And I said, "Where's Princeton?" Well, I wasn't going to go to college. So anyway, I ended up wrestling at Princeton and got an engineering degree. And came out and just realized I liked construction a lot. So I started in construction and got laid off my first two jobs, which was a great thing for a young, arrogant engineer to realize that.
Now, why did you get laid off? Do you know?
Oh yeah, it was a terrible recession in that
Okay, all right.
time. So it
Yeah,
really wasn't personal, but it feels personal when you have a baby at home and you don't have you're standing in an unemployment line.
exactly.
So, but it was actually one of the best things that ever happened because I realized that it's just a job, it's just, and when I had to let people go otherwise, I realized I wasn't, sentencing to death. I was just telling them they needed to find another job. So anyway, so yeah, I worked a bunch of different jobs, project manager. I worked as a engineer for a while, architect engineer for a while as I was getting my PE, and ran a construction company for 7 years at GC, and then I went on my own. Not sure quite what I was going to do. I had some health things, and I realized I didn't want to be running a 75-person company, and so I just went on my own. And I thought that maybe I could do this thing where I would be a construction manager and bring various people together, sort of act like a general contractor and not but not run anything through my books. My wife was from a plain family, and they didn't do stress well. And I thought, well, I could never have my own business because she could never, she couldn't stand the idea of people, us owing a lot of money. And so, but
Interesting.
when I would start this, I thought, well, if I'm just working as sort of a consultant, we're not going to be owed millions of dollars and owe people millions of dollars and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't think anybody would necessarily hire me for, why would you hire one person who's sort of, saying they're going to be, your engineer and your contractor. But it turns out, I kept thinking, well, if I was doing that, I'd say, well, what if you get hit by a beer truck? And well, it turns out people don't mostly ask that question. So anyway, people started hiring me, and yeah, I've just had a lot of really nice big projects and customers that I've stayed with that was back in '96. So that's
Okay.
quite a few years ago.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that's kind of how it came about.
So again, Ned, you and I first met right around 2000. It was an LCBC. We were building an auditorium. So back then, that was a huge project for us. And what I remember appreciating about you, we were interviewing several architects at the time. So realizing we're talking to pastors who are going through building programs. And it seemed like back in 2000, there were a few architects that focused on church buildings. And when we interviewed those architects and the people that might build the building for us, they kind of came in and told us what they were going to build us. They didn't really even ask what we wanted. It was just kind of like, here's what you need, here's what we'll build for you. And what jumped out to me and what I loved about you then, and I still appreciate about you now, Ned, is when we met with you and the architects that were working with you, it wasn't about what you're going to do for us. You really asked questions. You wanted to know what we were looking for, what we needed. And it was very different than what I experienced with architects before. And so, why is that? Is that still the case today where architects tend to come in and tell you what you need as opposed to really letting you
I
just express your
guess
needs?
I guess, they're just trying to get a job, so they're trying to impress and whatnot. I mean, what I recall from that is I had no intention of working with you because when I was working with when I was running the general construction company, we did a church, and I mean, we just got brutalized. They were just they were so full of fear, and the guy who was in charge just really didn't like our project manager. It was kind of a racist thing, and I mean, they hammered us, and I realized, and I sort of went to them thinking they were brothers in Christ, and I was given a good lesson on how not to mix spirituality and business. So
So you
anyway,
learned right away that churches necessarily aren't the best customers,
yeah.
best
So
business partners.
when somebody called me, a guy I knew called me and said, "Hey, our church is looking to do this auditorium." I said, "Well, I'll sit down and talk with them." I didn't know who you were, and I said, "I'll sit down and talk with them, but I'm not." Building churches sucks. I'm not working for a church building committee. I'm not. So I had no intention of doing it, but I often will sit down. I mean, yeah, I've done that plenty of times with people and sat down, listen to what they're going to say, and listen to what they're thinking, and then say, okay, here's the group I think you should go with, or here's like, you can go this way, you can go this way, you can go this way, but when I met the you and the people involved, it was like, huh, these people seem a little different, and it was also, and frankly, it was a nice big project too. And I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. And, maybe this could be okay.
So go into a little bit more because again, you're talking to pastors, you're talking to churches. Does first of all, let me just ask you: do most church projects do they always have a building committee? And is that part of the problem, or what are the problems you faced before with churches, so that guys can be careful of staying away from those problems?
Yeah, I'd say most churches do. I mean, at LCBC anymore, we don't. We did a few projects that way, and then the staff just got so competent that there just wasn't any decisions for the building committee to make, and eventually it
Yeah,
just kind of got guys like being involved, but there really wasn't anything for them to do. And at some point, busy people don't want to just waste their time, so there was no
right.
more building committee. But I'd say most churches do, and that's fine. I work for a fair number of nonprofits, and I mean, I live in this little town of Lidditz, grew up here, and I do the library, I do the Lidditz Rec Center, I do a lot of the nonprofit work, but I think with churches, um, there's a tendency just to have a lot of fear about being a faithful steward of the money, right?
Uh-huh.
And one of my favorite sayings is that the Bible 365 times says, "Do not fear, do not be afraid." It's the most stated thing in the Bible, but I think it's the least done in churches so many times. There's just a lot of fear, a lot of sense of, well, we're stewards, so we need to be. And what that translates into is we're either not going to make decisions promptly, or we're going to not make decisions ethically. We're going to be afraid of looking bad about spending. Where a lot of times the people who would make a better decision in their own personal life won't make it in a church building committee thing
Yeah,
situation.
interesting. So trying to be good stewards, afraid of how they're going to look if they make a bad decision.
Yeah.
And so does it end up translating, that people end up making bad decisions as opposed to good
Yeah, it,
decisions at
it
all?
does. I mean, at least in my experience, and actually a number of people I work with, and maybe you also expect a little bit more from a church, so it hurts more when you get
Yeah.
burned. I
Yeah.
was talking with one friend who said, you're saying it was years ago. He said, but are they that much worse than anybody else? It's but probably not. Maybe
Interesting.
not.
Yeah.
But I'm really careful about who I work for, and so I don't want to work for somebody who can't make prompt decisions and ethical decisions. It's as simple as treat other people the way you want to be treated. It isn't any different
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Interesting. Well, I will tell you guys, Ned is one of my favorite people, especially when it comes to construction. And as Ned said, probably the first, I don't know what, 4 or 5, maybe 6 projects, maybe not even that many. We did have a building committee. And you tend to put people on the building committee that have either business experience, maybe they have some construction experience, which can be good or bad, depending on who they are, because they may think they have the right decisions or they have the right knowledge set, and maybe they don't.
right.
And
Yeah.
so it
The,
can
the
be
old the
challenging
old
as well.
the old thing of the house builder telling you every step of the way what to do. And it's like, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But a
Exactly.
lot, on the other hand, there's some guys who are in that situation and are great, but they know what they know and they have a sense of what they don't know. And yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Ned, so working with LCBC, so I'm not looking to try to get you to toot LCBC's horn because I do that plenty myself, probably. But even good or bad things that happen, and you recount one often, there's always going to be surprises, aren't there, as far as things that come up in the project that you hadn't expected, where there's going to be cost potentially overrun or things like that. We had one situation come up, and we don't have to say the name of the vendor, where the cost was several $100,000 more than we expected. And so then the committee had to decide it really wasn't even the committee's fault at all. It wasn't their responsibility for the church to pay for that over cost, but describe that situation. Do you know the one I'm
I,
talking
I
about?
will, and if you don't mind, I think I will actually give the specifics because it's important to understanding of it.
Yeah, okay.
Because so I paid my way through college working for this company, Clare Brothers Audio, and they are the best sound company in the world. I've done all their work. I do all their work now, all the Rocklitis work and their work. And anyway, they had donated lots and lots of the sound. They donated all the sound system up to that point for LCBC, and I think we're a part of the success of LCBC. I mean, they had a world-class sound system in this little church, and so they were doing. We were doing in around 2000. We were doing this new auditorium, and I remember the sound lights and video came in at $1 million, and you were not happy about paying $1 million for sound lights and video. And it was like, but there's this back and forth of is it worth it? And you eventually came around like, and I didn't
And
have
this was like a $7 million project, right? So I mean,
yeah,
it was a
yeah,
big
it was
chunk
a
of
big,
that whole
yeah, it
thing.
was a
Yeah.
big chunk. And my specialty is saving money. That's what I love to do. So I wasn't sure it was worth it, but I also, I didn't have a strong opinion because I didn't know enough. But anyway, we decided to go and we're going through and we're getting near the end of the job and things are looking good. And I approve all the invoices like a general contractor does. And I am going through the invoices and I see that they're, I think, $200,000. They invoiced $200,000 more than their contract amount. And I was like, well, gee, they made a mistake. I contacted them and they said, oh no, that's our change order that you approved. I said, well, no, the change order I approved was for whatever it was, 40 or something. And it turns out they had made a math error in their change order, and they were saying, well, we spent all this. And I said, well, I'm a kind of a big believer in you pay for your mistakes and I pay for mine. I mean, I know you did, but we don't have the money. I mean, if you recall on that thing, we were out of money, and the big givers were kind of out of money. There were some things going on, and it was a bad situation. It was a situation where I was definitely wondering, are we going to be able to pay everybody? So we didn't want to be adding more, and the guys at Claire said, well, can we come in and at least see if we can get our direct equipment paid for? And can we get 75,000? We can probably eat the rest, but can we get 75,000, do you think, out of this? And so sure, come in and talk to the building committee. And they did. They made a presentation and they walked out, and as soon as they walked out, one of the building committee members said, well, I don't know that I'm comfortable with this. And I thought, oh man, here we go. These guys who helped me, so much in my life, they're going to get screwed. And I mean, that's exactly what I thought. And then the other guy said, yeah, I'm not comfortable with this either. We need to pay him the whole amount. And I thought, what? I mean, I would be surprised to hear anybody say this because they had asked for 75. And I would think, okay, well, they asked for 75, you give them 75 and you're looking like a hero. Both these guys, and unanimous was, yeah, we need to pay them the whole amount. We'll figure it out. And it still brings a tear to me, honestly. Gives me a little bit of chills because it was such a high integrity moment. And there really wasn't like, oh, the money's right there. It was saying we're going to have faith, but we're going to do the right thing. And the best part of it to me was I went back to their office and those guys weren't fans of churches, let's just say. And I sat down and they said, okay, how bad are we getting it or whatever, I mean, and I said, I recounted what happened and they were speechless. And so that has always stuck with me and that's the way I hope to respond, when the feces hits the fan and, in different ways. It's like, okay, well, what's the right answer here? So,
And then I've got to admit, back then I would have been late 30s, maybe. And had it not been for the business guys on that team that made that decision, I probably would have been more, yeah, let's not give them anything. And
mhm,
so I learned a lot from that. So the men on that team were just huge for me in learning a lot. You talked about operating out of fear, trying to be good stewards, and yet they were good stewards, but they also said we need to operate with integrity, as you just said in that particular example. They also taught me cutting corners doesn't usually pay off. And
yeah.
so you're going to regret it if you do it down the road. And so several things like that, I felt like I learned from that team that was just real beneficial in so many ways, even beyond construction.
Yeah, if I can just tell one story, I'm sure he wouldn't mind. He's passed now, but I just love this because it was right around this time, and Don Hershey, who was one of I think the church started in his basement, and he was a
Yeah.
farmer who turned businessman and was just a sharp guy, but just such a humble guy, and he was. He was driving out to Ohio. He had a big project. I think it was a $20 million project, and it the guy who owned it had done some things that had really made the federal regulators annoyed. It was a big chicken processing, egg chicken place, and they weren't getting a permit, and this was like a bunch of money that it didn't seem like it was going to ever produce revenue, and so he was out a couple $1 million, and that's a lot of money, and uh, and he said he was driving out, and he said, I prayed and I just said, God, you've got a problem here. I don't know how you're going to solve it, but you need to solve it. And I just always thought, what a great way to talk with God.
Yeah, that's good. And that, I don't know that that always happens, especially on buildings committee, because everybody starts getting, they want their way, they want their decisions and things like that. So, and maybe it's just part of working with a committee that's part of the challenge. And yeah, so talk about real quick. You've done some more churches since, but even just building projects. What are things if you've got a pastor, if we've got pastors that are thinking about they're going to go into a building project, what kind of things ought they be thinking about that maybe typically churches don't even think about when they're going into construction? I mean, part of it is, what I found interesting at LCBC, Ned, when we built that auditorium for $7 million, we knew we were going to run out of space for kids' space and things like that, but we didn't have the money to go further. And so
Mhm.
I got criticized with people saying, "Well, you were short-sighted. You should have, built a $15 million building and done all of it." Well, we couldn't have. We would have never built
Mhm.
any of it because we didn't
Yeah.
have the money to do that. And so, what are things that people ought to be thinking about as they go into these building projects that you think would be beneficial for them to hear?
Yeah, a couple things come to mind. One is, think about your highest value. I was involved with someone who they had an architect involved before, and they were going to build their office space first. They're going to build a big office space project, and then they were going to go do this, and it was all going to be kind of fancy, and it was going to be 10 years till they could build, the big auditorium that they
Yeah,
really thought they needed. And I got they again, it was something I had no intention of working for him. God drugged me into it, actually, against my will almost. But I did end up working for him. But I said, guys, this doesn't make any sense. You need to simplify dramatically. You're not building a monument to yourselves or to the architect here. I'm pretty skeptical of architects generally. So, you have to really manage that it doesn't become a monument. And I think you should be building at good costs. And so, you need to simplify the vision of the building design, and you need to get the thing that matters the most, which for them was an auditorium. You need to get this building. We actually, on that one, we ended up, I presented a pre-engineered metal building as a cost savings way, and we built it as a pre-engineered metal building, and they thought it was going to be, the whole thing was going to be 20 million, and we got done what they needed to get done for like 11.
that's great. That's amazing.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it was a big difference. And but we simply, you really have to, simplify design, and you have to, like, you make a big mistake if you just figure the architect's going to do all the thinking of the design. You have to be pushing them. You have to be engaged. One thing that I did actually learn from you was you hate tight corridors. And I've always pushed for tight corridors because they save money. And I started to argue with you on the tight corridors, and at some point I realized I'm going to lose this, so I'm just going to stop arguing. And what I saw was, yeah, they do cost a little bit more, but the flow is such an important part for how people feel that it's worth it. Like, I don't generally push for tight corridors almost any place anymore, because a little bit of extra room there just, it just makes everybody feel better. And so that's another thing that, you know, really thinking through the flow, which is basically thinking about success, saying, okay, if we do this, and it's, you can't expect everything always to be more popular than you expected, but you, I think, can hope and pray it's going to be. And if it is, how's it going to work?
Yeah.
If and those little things of people just feeling a little too pushed tight together is a fairly big deal. So
Yeah, I know when the architects came in and made their presentations, they were presenting long rectangular buildings with pews and all the windows and just
yeah,
fancy, so almost a monument, to your point.
yeah,
And I remember saying I want it to look more like a shopping mall than a
yeah,
monument. And so yeah, the big corridors. Talk a little bit more about you said the value first, because I watch churches make this mistake all the time, not only in buildings but with staff or things like that, where they'll hire somebody that will make it easier for the work that they're doing, but it's not going to bring any more people into the church. Or to your point, offices would make it nicer for the staff, but it's
yeah,
not going to bring, there's not anybody's going to go, oh, let's go to that church because they've got nice offices. Nobody's going to say that. And so
yeah.
just the value. And so, yeah, helping people line up the proper value. What's going to bring the biggest return, really, is what you're saying.
It is, and having that really clear focus of that, that was the thing with LCBC that most impressed me, I think, of all the different stuff, was that clear focus through the project of, how does this impact the person who, how's this help somebody come to Christ?
Yeah.
And how's this impact the new person who's coming? And everything was went through that lens. There were, people were wild, if you remember, that we didn't have a center aisle because, well, my daughter's not going to be able to get married there without a center aisle. And it was a big discussion. I think you broke the tie of, like, this isn't about your daughter getting married. Go to a wedding chapel, which people do not like to hear. Your big givers do not like to hear that I just gave, $500,000 to this facility that I won't be able to get my daughter married in. But everything was about how does it affect, what is our purpose here? And I had never heard that before, but you'd said that a lot, that, this, if people are going to be comfortable, it should feel like something they're comfortable in. The music should feel like something they're comfortable with. They're used to, the level of quality should be at a good shopping mall level. And I don't know if you remember this, but we had some real zoning issues, and we went through, and I mean, it was a long shot for us to get the zoning. We do, and any zoning is a long shot, I have to say. You never are sure you're going to get zoning, and we really didn't have a good argument. But anyway, we went presented, and the person who was the stenographer had, she had told you, had told me this a year later, maybe, she had told you that she had never stepped foot in a church. And when she heard our zoning, presentation, she just thought, well, this, in church, if you've never stepped foot in a church, going to a church is scary, right? I mean, why would you even think about doing it? And she heard our presentation. She thought, these people seem maybe a little different. And she, willed up the courage to go. But if that's the situation, I mean, if somebody gives you a bad look in the parking lot, you're gone, right? You're
Yeah,
you're turning around
exactly.
and driving away. I mean, any step, any barrier to that person coming the first time drives them away. And that, I think that's the way you look at it. That, like, that, the flow of that person coming in and being completely, like, by the end of that service, feeling like I felt, I felt comfortable there. I felt, I mean, if you can feel I felt accepted there, that's amazing. But even just, I
Yeah.
didn't hate it is good. Um,
And really what you're trying to do is remove as many barriers possible to them
mm,
feeling comfortable enough to actually come to Christ. And so, yeah, and there are a lot of barriers we put up in our buildings that whether we think about it or not. I remember Andy Martin when he first came to LCBC visiting, and this was before you had built any of our buildings. And his comment to me, and this is before he even accepted the job at LCBC, said it felt more like a funeral home than a church building. I was like, okay, thank you, Andy, for
yeah.
that. We ended up hiring him, and it ended up being a good thing. But yeah, you have to look there and say, what are we saying with our buildings and the way we decorate, the way everything? You're saying
Yeah.
something. So what are you saying? So
Yeah, the
yeah.
signage is a big thing. I remember I was an deacon in a small plain church where my wife grew up, and we talked a lot about having new people come. It didn't much happen, but we certainly wanted it to happen. And I, just being a problem solver, was like, well, if somebody new comes, they couldn't even know where to go because everybody comes in, they all know we all know where to go. But so can we put up signs? And it was absolute no,
Really interesting.
no,
Interesting.
no.
Uh,
And I never quite knew why, but I do know that was the moment where I felt like, I'm not really quite talking the same language. I mean, I still love those people. It was a great family church and everything, but at that moment I felt like, we're not really on the same page.
yeah, yeah.
And not that I was better or worse, just different.
Yeah. So, an aside, Ned and Debbie have been a part of LCBC since right about 2000. And so it was fun that even in the midst of working together, where it would be easy to have tensions and disagreements and cause you to dislike what you were seeing, you guys became part of LCBC. And it's been great to have you a part of the church. So, Ned, talk real quick. You made a couple comments about architects and not always loving architects. You also made some comments about you like to simplify and save money. So that's one of the things that we have appreciated about you so much is I developed a trust in you that if you're involved on a project, you're not going to spend money wastefully. And so that was a huge thing for me because I was always concerned and suspicious early on that, oh, they're going to, maybe it's just because of my experiences with architects before, I just assumed they were going to spend high. And so construction manager as opposed to an architect or contracting with a firm to build a building, what are the differences there?
Yeah, any of them can be good. You need to know what you're signing up for and who you're working with. So the one model is you hire an architect, they do the building design, and then you bid to, 3 or 4 general contractors. That can be a good model if you really trust the architect and you don't mind some conflict, right?
Yeah.
I'm not generally a fan of that model because one, it's pretty hard to find an architect who will design exactly what you want and keep costs in control. And
And
it
that was again what we learned is they came in and told us what we wanted and it was like, no, it's not actually what we want. Oh no, this is the way we build all our buildings. And so
yeah, it can be that, or it can just be. I mean, people, you become an architect because you have an artistic tenant
an artist,
nature, and
yeah,
it's nothing bad necessarily, but just the way. And then the fact is, it takes a lot more effort to build a more cost-effective building, and they generally get paid a percentage of the total cost. So you're asking them to work harder and take home less money, and that's
yeah,
generally a bad idea. And there's no good way around that. I mean, you can
yeah,
say where I would one thing I would say, if you're going that model, never pay an architect a percent of construction. That's one like takeaway. Don't do it. Agree on a fixed fee. If you need to make an adjustment because you've changed your mind a bunch of times, then agree on an adjustment. But don't pay a percent of construction because everybody wants to buy their kids Christmas presents, and you want a Christmas bonus because your firm made money. And if your firm lost money on the job because you made all these changes and didn't get paid for it. So anyway, just
interesting, yeah,
that's something I would never do. So like I said, it can be okay to just hire an architect and get 3 bids, but when you do that, the low bid has to be the person who's been most aggressive. So they probably cut their fee down. They probably maybe hired subs that weren't quite as good. So I'm not generally a fan of that for churches. There's places to do it. If you're building a shopping mall, everybody knows the rules. Nobody, they get done almost the exact same way each time. And that's a better model for there. I don't think it's a great model for a church. I also don't think, They do end in disputes fairly often, and churches aren't great with, those kind of
And why
disputes.
do you say that? What kind of disputes do they end up in?
Well, because the whole nature of it is a dispute. The architect draws a set of plans, the general contractors bid on them,
Okay.
but then, well, what wasn't clearly shown, and that's where the
Okay.
disputes come.
Okay.
So the
Which
other
means
method.
change orders, which means higher prices. And
Yeah, and the
yeah,
change orders are because the plans and what the guy bid aren't the same. And
yeah, yeah,
so another way is a design build, hiring a single design build contractor. The contractor employs the architect under him, either as a member's firm or whatever, or off to the side. But I think that's generally better for churches, and that's what probably most churches do. And that way you can pick somebody who has satisfied a lot of other churches. You can see what their track record is, and at least you're hiring a contractor who deals with the costs every day. So you're more likely to get some value built into your project that way. Um, and that's generally for churches, that's the way I say to go. The way I do it, there aren't a lot of people that do what I do. I'm a one person firm, and I've helped maybe like 7 other people go into their own small firms that support what I do. So, and I don't run anything through my books, so we don't ever have overhead and profit on our projects. The way we do it is just super efficient, but there aren't a lot of people that do this. So that's the way I do it is another way. And there are other construction managers. Um, Again, I'd say you want to be really careful um, who you decide to work with. It definitely is worth a lot of time doing evaluation ahead of time.
and even you saying that, Ned, it may not be so much a matter of what style, meaning architect and a construction company working together, or design build, or construction manager. It may be more important who is the person you're working with. Do you trust them? May be the
Yeah.
biggest piece of it. So yeah, know who you're working with.
It is, and always be aware. This is another, I think, important takeaway. Always be aware of who's selling you the job and who you're actually going to work with, because generally, there's some impressive person who's either a partner or a salesperson who comes in and is wonderful, but once the deal's signed, they only come back if there's a big problem.
Yeah,
And
interesting.
like knowing who's actually doing the work. We made a decision. We were going to work with one local architecture firm, if you recall, in LCBC, and I liked them. I've known them for years, and I thought they were great guys, and that's who I thought we should probably work with. But I didn't care. And then somebody else had found this firm that was 2 hours away, and they had done more of this style building, but and they gave the goofiest presentation. I mean, they were not good sellers, but but we knew it was the two guys' names. It was Man Hughes,
Yeah,
and Man Hughes were the two people we're going to be working with. And it was a funny thing because after the presentations, both architects presented in the same day. The deal, and I thought, well, sure. I mean, I thought everybody would have thought, well, Beers, the other firm that presented, was going to be getting the job, and the request by you guys was, well, let's take 2 weeks and pray about it and come back. And we came back, and it was almost overwhelmingly in favor of Man Hughes, which really surprised me, but was absolutely the right pick because they were just simply wonderful. We still work with
yeah.
them, and
Yeah. And what's funny about that, Ned, is I remember Warren, who was the older of the two partners,
yeah,
he squatted the whole time as he was presenting because he was trying to stay out of the way of the screen. That in itself impressed me immensely because I
I
can't
know.
squat for 30 seconds, and he must have squatted for 45 minutes or an hour.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But that's who we ended up. Those guys who were giving the presentation, who was actually does the work, still
Yeah.
do the work, and that, yeah. So that part, and when you're trying to pick those people, obviously you ask for references. But one trick I've learned, a guy who was really, really successful had taught me this, that you ask for your 3 references, but then ask for what's the worst project that they've done. What's the project that's been most um, of a struggle for them, and ask for a reference on that.
Interesting.
And yeah, and obviously if people lie, they can, but then I think you can kind of see, like if they give you a
Yeah.
project that really wasn't a bad project, but I know the guy did it to me. I gave him a project we ended up in arbitration on.
Yeah.
And he called, it was a school, and he called the person, and she actually she said, yeah, we really saw it and we won the arbitration and it cost them a lot of money. And she said, yeah, I mean, uh, it was a challenging thing, but she felt our integrity was good. It
Yeah.
was just
That's
we
good.
saw different sides, and that's a good question to ask and to try to run down because again, we're always trying to find the good in people, but this is a situation where you're trying to look for some of the not so good too.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
how
Exactly.
how do they fail?
Yeah. So I think trust is a huge piece. And Ned, one of the things that, like I said, I developed a trust in you and I had confidence in you that you were going to be looking out for us. What are ways to bring prices down? What are the things that drive cost up in a building? And what are ways that you look at to save money on a building? And I know you were always pushing. It was funny. Rarely am I ever in a position where I'm saying, no, let's spend more money. But with
Yeah,
you, I'd go, yeah, let's spend a little more
yeah,
money here. Let's not do it quite that cheap. So, but
yeah,
what are ways to keep a project cheaper?
yeah. Well,
Or reduce the cost. I shouldn't
yeah,
say cheaper,
absolutely.
but
Yeah, keep it more a better value. I always, when I look at doing a project the most efficient way, I always start with the structure and the heating and cooling system. And because those two things work together, that's where there's a ball. If you're going to build it in an efficient way, you need to have the structure and the HVAC system sort of worked out to start, and then everything else follows behind that. Even the flow, the layout, and everything follows behind
now
that.
that's funny. I would never think an architect would say that. I would think they would say, let's start with a design that's going to look flashy or whatever. But
Yeah,
would they think the
yeah.
same way, or is that unique to you as an engineer?
Yeah, I think that's unique to me. I've never heard
Yeah,
anybody else say it, but I
interesting.
think it is. That's what I see as, and you sort of say, okay. And when I say structure, it's like, well, is this going to be steel bar joist? Is it going to be a pre-engineered steel building? Is it going to be wood, glulam wood? Is it going to? So you sort of think of that, and then you think, is this going to have rooftop units sitting on the roof? Is it going to have? And as you recall, at LCBC, we decided that the sound was important to us and we wouldn't put rooftop units on the roof. We didn't want that during prayer, that whoa
Wow.
sound. So we put them out back. And so that changed the design, it changed how you slope things. And so we did start with that. We sort of so like and the HVAC is, that's a big deal. So
Yeah,
I think you think about the structure and you think about the HVAC, and then you've got kind of like, okay, well, this is a parameter, these are two big parameters. And then you think about how do we want people to flow? What do we want this thing to do? And then only then do you start thinking about what's it going to look like.
interesting.
That
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's the way I would do it. That's the way I do
yeah.
it.
That's great. What are mistakes people make when they're looking at buildings?
Um, let's see.
Is it not thinking through what you just described and just some of those efficiencies, or do they come in more worried about aesthetics and things like that? Or
Well, yeah, I'd say a lot of I think probably the biggest thing is jumping into the details too soon.
okay,
We all love to solve details. We're mostly affected people, right, that are doing this, and we pride ourselves in on making decisions and getting things. And so there's a tendency to jump right into the details, and it takes discipline to like hold back and say, wait a minute, I'm not ready for that decision. I need to make a bigger, harder decision first.
okay,
And that like picking the wrong people to work with is by far the biggest mistake people make. But again,
yeah,
that's that idea of like, don't jump right into that. Force yourself to look at the bad as best. Everybody's got some bad stuff in their background. You should know at least some of it,
yeah, yeah,
and force yourself to really look hard and be pretty well convinced that, hey, I'm really excited about working with these people. And I say that's probably the biggest thing is picking the right team, and then going slow a bit through the process of design. It's going to take you longer than you think.
yeah.
But
Hey, Ned, so I'll just say real quick, I've loved working with you. I've loved working with the construction crews you pull in or the different contractors you work with, to the point where we pretty much stayed with all, for the most part, all the same subs, right, for the last 25 years. And probably every 6 or 7 years, the elders will say, well, we need to kind of look and make sure that we're still doing
Got
it
this Pelger
efficiently.
guy. Why are we
Yeah, why
paying
do we
this
keep
Pelger
working with
guy?
him? And are we asking for competitive bids? And so, and it's
Yeah,
probably not every 7 or 8 years, but probably every 10 years or so, it seems
yeah,
like he'll say, we need to get some other pricing. And then we'll look at it and we go, nope, it's still, that's the right one to be working with and
yeah.
the people. And so it's funny how we go through those cycles. I think probably for me, Ned, the kind of things I would always want it to be faster than it ever turned out. So you said it does take
Mhm.
longer. And so Jim Stuckey, who works with you on our team, I'd always say, yeah, we're going to have it done in whatever, 18 months, 24 months. And it'd say, no, it's going to be more like 36. And I'd say, yeah, 24. And he was always right. It always
Yeah,
ended up
yeah.
being what he said. And I always realized, even though I was pushing hard to get it done at a certain time, the last 6 months, it didn't matter that we were 6 months late. What mattered is we got it right. And so, yeah, just be careful not to force things, I guess I would say.
Mhm.
And then just be careful not to cut corners. And I do feel like I learned that from some of the guys, Noah and Don Hershey on
Yeah,
our building committees, is you always end up regretting it when you cut too many corners too
yeah.
tightly. So
And it's hard to know. I mean,
yeah,
it's hard to know what's a prudent decision and what's cutting corners, but that's your job.
yeah,
Your
yeah,
job is, and I like, for me, I'm always gonna, propose the least expensive way to do it, knowing that that's not always the right answer. But you should always, I think that's another good thing, is to always ask for the less expensive way, to at least know where's the bottom here, where's the middle, where's the top,
yeah,
and to be able to, and not that going in the middle is always the right answer, but there are some times when it's like, you know what, this is a situation where I just had one today on LCBC. We're looking at a fence. It's like, yeah, save the money and go with the more commodity product. And it's not the best product in the world, but it'll do. It'll be
yeah.
fine for this scenario, for
This
what we're doing.
situation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just 2 minutes before I before I took this, I
yeah.
sent that
Interesting.
over to
Good.
Jim. Yeah.
Hey, one other question I'll ask you, Ned. So, growing up in Texas, everything was pro business, pro growth. Let's build, and it's very different here. You mentioned zoning is always it's not sure you're going to get passed. So, one of the things that we've done at LCBC is not all of our buildings have been from the ground up. We've had to go in and look
Mhm.
for other buildings. And so, what are some advantages of going from an existing building that you have to refurbish to, as opposed to going for one that you're building from the ground up?
Yeah, well, the biggest single advantage is the site work's done. If you can
Okay.
buy a place that has adequate parking, you spend so much money and time getting the land development plans approved and all the stormwater stuff, and you can find one that has that. There's a big time advantage, a big cost advantage. Renovating versus building new, it's about a toss up. A lot of, it's rare that you save that much. You would think, oh, I've got this shell, so it's going to cost half as much, but it doesn't usually.
Yeah.
Till
Yeah.
it's usually not quite what you need, and you end up, raising the roof here or doing this or that. And I'd rather renovate than do new anytime I can. I mean, it's always better in my opinion, but um, the big advantage is in the site work costs.
Yeah. Okay. What about, do you have any opinions? So I think at LCBC, we maybe have what, 3 or 4 leased buildings. Most of them we own. Do you have opinions as to leased versus owning? And I guess the advantage is we can get in quicker. Sometimes we can't find the property to buy. And so to me, the disadvantage is you've done a lot of refurbishing and put a lot of money into something you don't own, but probably the expense isn't as high up front. Do you have preferences, lease versus own?
Not in my capacity as, as the builder, the design professional and the builder. I mean, personally, I don't think it should matter that much to the church whether they own it or not. I mean, if we're at the position of cashing out at the end, it's not, if it's a personal investment, well, yeah, then you'd probably want to own if you can. To me, I look at it as a member of the church that, what works.
Interesting. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I don't sit on boards. I'm not a good, I'm definitely a project problem solver. So I'm not a good big picture guy.
Yeah. Well, cool. Hey, it's fun talking to you. Very fun working with you, Ned, over the years, and appreciate all that you've done and continue to do for LCBC and just other churches and business as well. Um, if somebody's thinking about doing some type of building project, and I would guess most pastors in the back of their heads are thinking about it,
Sure.
what would be some first steps to just really consider and make sure they're taking the right first steps as they get in? And you kind of said it maybe already of know who you're working with, probably the most important choice, but any advice for first steps?
Yeah, I'd say, if you have a little bit of time, just be getting to know, like ask around what other churches are building, be paying attention, who they're working with, be just sort of asking questions. How are those guys? I know a number of firms, GC firms, design build GC firms that do a really nice job. And we're pretty blessed here in Pennsylvania. We've got this great work ethic, and I'm doing a project now down in Nashville, and it's just a different. It's just a different world.
Are you doing Claire Brothers project down there?
I got drug into it. Yeah, I'm,
Okay.
I'm not. I'm not doing it as I'm not in charge of it. I'm just
Okay.
a consultant for the owner. So,
Okay.
but we really are. We've got a lot of good firms. But I'd say get to know. To me, I would always try to start with if it was me, I would always try to start with a design build general contractor. And if you have somebody that you kind of know, I think that's a very good relationship. If you know there's somebody in the area that there may be a project in the future, talk to them. Just kind of get on their radar and see if you like them, see how they work.
Hey, so this is a question. I think I've seen a few churches that it looked to me like a home builder did them, not somebody that is built bigger buildings. And so based on what I've seen, I'd say stay away from them. But would you agree? Home building is very different than what we're talking about here. And so your home builder that happens to be in your church is probably not the best person to be doing this.
I would. It could end up being a really expensive lesson for you because just depending on how the building code, officials are and whatnot, there's just so much that's different. I would certainly, I wouldn't want to go with somebody who hasn't built, a fair number of churches before because they are really
Commercial
different.
buildings or yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
even churches. I mean,
Okay.
churches it's different working with church groups. I mean, I know one guy who I really like, and he said, we don't build that fast on the churches because they need to see them. They're going to change their mind a lot, and it's going to cost them a lot less if they have a little bit of time to see things step by step than
Interesting.
you bust it all out and then they end up having to tear a whole bunch more down.
Interesting.
So I
Yeah.
thought that was an interesting point that.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. Ned, thanks for the time. Appreciate you very much. And thank you for sharing your insights with us. Very helpful.
Yep, I appreciate you too, and I love your next chapter with GLS. It's very, very cool. I'm glad you're not just sitting playing golf and you're out there making the world a better place. So
Thanks, Ned. I appreciate it.
thanks a lot. See you.
Talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to the Advantage Podcast with David Ashcraft and for participating in our goal to strengthen and encourage pastors and their churches so more people are introduced to Jesus across Pennsylvania. If you found this helpful, feel free to pass it along. To find out more about the work of The Advantage, visit our website at theadvantage.org.